Welcome back to Midnight Affair Tales. Thank you for joining us. The night air was thick with silence, but something felt off. Daniel Carter wasn't supposed to be home this early. His latest project had wrapped up ahead of schedule, so instead of spending another night in a hotel, he took the late drive back to Dallas, Texas, eager to surprise his wife, Melissa. But when he pulled into the driveway, his house was empty. The lights were off, no TV noise, no movement inside. Melissa was supposed to be home. A cold chill ran through his veins as he checked his phone. No missed calls. No texts. Just the same unread messages he had sent earlier in the evening. Hey babe. Heading home early. Gonna surprise you. Excited to see you tonight. No response. Daniel frowned, opening Find My Phone. They had shared their locations for years. It was how they kept track of each other. A habit. A trust thing. But now, as he watched the little blinking dot on the map, his stomach dropped. Melissa wasn't at home. She was at a hotel. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, knuckles turning white. This had to be a mistake. Maybe she was out with friends? A work event? But at a hotel this late at night? His heart pounded. Without thinking, he shifted into drive, the engine roaring as he sped toward the address. 10 minutes later, he was standing in front of the Regency Suites, a cheap hotel on the other side of town. His hands shook as he walked into the lobby. "Excuse me," he said, forcing a polite tone. "I'm looking for Melissa Carter. I think she might be staying here." The receptionist barely glanced up. "Room 214. No hesitation. No questions. Like this wasn't the first time. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears as he stepped into the elevator, watching the numbers climb. 205, 207, 210, 212, 214. His fingers trembled as he reached for the handle, but the door was already slightly open. Voices. Laughter. And then the sound that shattered his world. Melissa's voice moaning. Daniel pushed the door open. There she was. Melissa. Naked. Tangled in the sheets. With another man. And not just any man. Jake. Her ex-husband. A man who had broken her once before, left her in pieces. The man she had sworn she would never speak to again. Yet here she was. With him. Melissa's eyes widened in shock as she saw Daniel standing there. Daniel. But Jake? He just smirked. The air in the room turned suffocating. Daniel's chest burned. His vision blurred. And then came the worst part. From the corner of the room, a voice rang out. A familiar, casual, almost amused voice. "Well, this is awkward." Daniel turned. Sophia. His stepdaughter. Sitting in the corner, sipping a glass of wine, watching it all unfold like a spectator at a show. And then she spoke the words that shattered him more than anything else. "You should leave, Daniel. Mom's finally happy now." The world spun. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might explode. Was this real? How long had they all been laughing behind his back? How long had he been played for a fool? And more importantly, what the hell was he going to do now? Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, his world crumbling around him. His wife, the woman he had built a life with, lay tangled in sheets with her ex-husband. His stepdaughter, the girl he had raised, supported, and loved as his own, sat in the corner with a smirk, acting like this was nothing more than a casual evening. The weight of betrayal settled deep in his gut. Melissa pulled the sheet over her chest, her face turning pale. "Daniel, it's not what it looks like," she stammered. "Not what it looks like." His vision blurred with rage. The sheets were wrinkled, the air thick with the scent of sweat and sex. The evidence was undeniable. Yet here she was still trying to lie to his face. Jake chuckled, stretching out his arms lazily. "Relax, man. You act like you caught her murdering someone. It's just sex." Daniel's fists clenched so tight his nails bit into his palms. "Just sex?" Sophia set her glass of wine down on the nightstand and sighed. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mom deserves to be happy." Happy. That word burned him more than anything. He had spent years making Melissa happy, giving her a home, stability, love. And this was her repayment? Daniel took a step forward, his voice dangerously low. "How long?" Melissa's lip quivered. How long?" Jake stretched, smirking again. "A little over a year," he said casually. "Since last summer." "A year. A goddamn year." Melissa had been in his arms every night, kissing him, telling him she loved him, while secretly sneaking around with this bastard. Daniel let out a hollow laugh. So what was I? The fool keeping the bills paid while you played house with your ex. Melissa opened her mouth, but Sophia cut in first. Come on, Daniel. Don't act so shocked. You had to know things weren't perfect between you two. Daniel turned his gaze to her, his stomach churning. And you knew? Sophia shrugged. Of course I did. I covered for her a few times. The final dagger. The girl he had helped raise, supported through school, treated like his own, had been in on it. The air in the room thickened with unspoken tension. Daniel looked at Melissa, searching for some kind of remorse. But there was none. Only guilt that she got caught. I'm leaving, Daniel said, his voice void of emotion. Melissa sat up, gripping the sheet. Wait, Daniel. But he was already gone. The drive home felt like a blur. Daniel barely remembered pulling into his driveway, stepping inside the house he had built for a family that never truly belonged to him. His hands trembled as he poured himself a drink. 1 year. His wife had been sleeping with another man for a year. And his stepdaughter had supported it. A sharp knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Melissa standing there, her hair still messy, her shirt hastily thrown on. We need to talk, she said softly. Daniel scoffed. Now you want to talk? She hesitated, then stepped inside, her eyes darting around the room like she barely recognized it. I never wanted to hurt you, she started. It just happened. Daniel took a slow sip of whiskey. It just happened, he echoed. You accidentally fell onto your ex-husband every week for a year? Melissa flinched. You weren't there for me, Daniel. That sent a cold rage through his veins. I worked my ass off, he snapped. I paid for this house. I made sure you and Sophia had everything. I gave you a life better than what you had with Jake. And you threw it away. Tears welled in her eyes, but he wasn't falling for it. You don't understand, she whispered. I still love Jake. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Then why did you marry me? Melissa hesitated. Because I thought I had moved on. But when I saw him again, I realized I hadn't. Daniel exhaled slowly. And Sophia? She's okay with all this? Melissa wiped her eyes. She wants me to be happy. Happy. That goddamn word again. Daniel stepped back, his voice cold. Then go be happy with Jake. Melissa paled. What do you mean? I mean get out of my house. She gasped. Daniel? You made your choice, he cut in. And now I'm making mine. He grabbed her purse and shoved it into her hands. I'll send your things later. But you're not sleeping here tonight? Melissa looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. For the first time she realized he wasn't begging. He wasn't angry. He was done. The next morning, Daniel woke up in an unfamiliar silence. No Melissa making coffee, no Sophia's usual morning chatter. Just nothing. He should have felt relief. But all he felt was rage bubbling beneath the surface. A knock at the door. He opened it to find Sophia standing there, arms crossed, a smug look on her face. What do you want? He asked flatly. Mom needs to get her stuff, Sophia said. You can't just kick her out like that. Daniel smirked. I did. And I can. Sophia scoffed. You're really gonna do this? Over one mistake. Daniel's patience snapped. One mistake, he repeated. She cheated for a year and you helped cover for her. You're just as guilty. Sophia rolled her eyes. God, you're pathetic. No wonder she wanted Jake back. The insult landed, but not the way she intended. Daniel's smirk widened. Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea what's coming? Sophia frowned. What the hell does that mean? Daniel leaned against the doorframe, voice deadly calm. It means your mother thinks she got away with this. She thinks I'll just walk away and let her be happy. He let out a low chuckle. She has no idea how wrong she is. Sophia took a step back. You're scaring me. Good, Daniel said. Now get off my property. He slammed the door in her face. As he stood in the silence of his empty house, he let the rage settle into something colder, sharper. He wasn't going to get mad. He was going to get even. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers he'd pulled from the drawer. He had a choice to make. He could walk away, let Melissa and Jake ride off into the sunset while he picked up the broken pieces of his life. He could burn everything down. A slow smirk tugged at his lips. Walking away had never been his style. Melissa thought she had won. She thought she could throw away a good man and run back to a man who had already discarded her once. And Sophia? That ungrateful brat had the audacity to mock him in his own home. They thought he was weak. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. With renewed purpose, he grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Hey, Carter," a deep voice answered. "Been a while." "Yeah, it has," Daniel replied. "I need a favor, Matt." Matt Connolly wasn't just an old friend. He was one of the best private investigators in Texas. "Let me guess," Matt said. "This is about your wife?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Not for much longer. I want to know everything about her and Jake. I want dirt, secrets, financial records, anything I can use." There was a pause, then a dark chuckle. "You want this done quietly, or do you want them to feel it?" Daniel smiled, his grip tightening on the phone. "Oh, they're gonna feel it." Melissa was used to getting her way. For the past year she had juggled two men like a queen on her throne, Daniel, the stable provider, and Jake, the wild thrill she couldn't resist. But for the first time she felt uneasy. Daniel had always been the kind of man to talk things through, to compromise. But last night? That wasn't a compromise. That was something else entirely. And when she tried to use her debit card that morning to buy groceries? Declined. Confused, she checked her account balance. Zero. A chill ran down her spine. Daniel wouldn't. Would he? She tried calling the bank, only to be informed that her joint accounts with Daniel had been locked. Panic bubbled inside her. She had always assumed Daniel was soft, but this was calculated. Her phone rang. "Sophia." "Mom, we have a problem," Sophia said, voice uneasy. "Daniel is not playing games anymore," Melissa finished, gripping the phone tightly. For the first time she realized she had severely underestimated him. Daniel stood in his office, staring at the files Matt had sent over. Melissa and Jake were hiding more than just an affair. Jake wasn't just a deadbeat, he was a fraud. Bank loans, unpaid debts, a criminal history that could ruin him. And Melissa? She had secrets too. Debt she had never told Daniel about. A hidden credit card he never knew existed. Thousands spent on trips, gifts, most of it for Jake. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a slow, satisfied smirk forming. They had no idea he had all of this in his hands. And now, it was time to make his first move. Melissa sat on the couch, scrolling through her banking app for the 100th time, hoping it was a glitch. Balance, $0. It wasn't a mistake. It was Daniel. Panic clawed at her throat as she turned to Sophia, who was lazily flipping through her phone. "He froze everything," Melissa whispered. Sophia glanced up, unconcerned. "So, just talk to him?" Melissa gritted her teeth. "Did you see how he looked at me last night? That wasn't Daniel. That was..." She hesitated, swallowing hard. "That was someone else." Sophia sighed, tossing her phone onto the table. "God, Mom, it's just money. You have Jake. He can cover things for a while." Melissa hesitated. Jake. She had yet to tell him that her access to Daniel's money was gone. Biting her lip, she grabbed her phone and dialed. "Hey, babe," Jake's voice answered smoothly. "Miss me already?" She forced a laugh. "Always. Listen, I have a little problem. Daniel locked me out of the accounts." Silence. Then, "So, what do you want me to do about it?" Her stomach twisted. I thought you could help. Just for a bit." Jake let out a low chuckle. It wasn't reassuring. "Melissa, I love you, but I'm not your damn ATM. You should have handled things better." Her grip tightened around the phone. "Jake, we talked about this. We were supposed to." He cut her off. "Relax. We'll figure something out. But I'm not about to bankroll your whole life." Melissa felt the blood drain from her face. She had counted on Jake stepping up. And now, he was already backing away. Sophia, watching her mother's expression shift, frowned. "What's wrong?" Melissa hung up the call, feeling cold dread settle in her chest. "We're on our own," she whispered. For the first time, Sophia looked worried. Daniel sat in his truck outside the law office, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. The papers sat neatly in the passenger seat: divorce documents, a restraining order application, and a motion to separate all financial ties. This wasn't just about leaving Melissa. This was about ruining her. He had spent years building a life for her, providing for Sophia, giving them stability. And in return, she had spit on all of it. Well, now she'd learn what it was like to lose everything. With a deep breath, he grabbed the folder and stepped into the office. Melissa wasn't prepared for the next blow. When the lawyer handed her the divorce papers, her hands trembled. Daniel filed this morning, the attorney explained. He's seeking full separation of assets and is formally requesting you vacate the home within the next 10 days. Melissa's mind reeled. He can't do this, she whispered. The attorney sighed. Mrs. Carter, your name isn't on the house deed. The accounts are under his sole ownership. Financially, you're at a disadvantage. Melissa's breath hitched. Everything. He was taking everything. Sophia watched, pale-faced, as her mother struggled to find words. But he wouldn't. Except he would. And he was. Mom, Sophia said, voice quieter than usual. What are we gonna do? Melissa clenched her fists. She wouldn't go down without a fight. She had one last card to play. Jake was already pulling away. Melissa could feel it. She showed up at his apartment that night, unannounced, desperate to reel him back in. She knocked twice before the door opened. Jake stood there, shirtless, his cocky smirk faltering the moment he saw her face. Melissa, he sighed. You look like hell. She pushed past him, stepping inside. I need your help. Jake shut the door, rubbing a hand over his face. Look, babe, I told you. Melissa grabbed his wrist. Please. Just listen. He sighed, sitting down on the couch. All right. Talk. She swallowed her pride. Daniel's freezing me out. I have nowhere to go and no money. I need you. Jake studied her, his expression unreadable. Melissa felt her stomach twist. Jake? He exhaled sharply. Melissa, I love you. I do. But I can't get involved in this mess. Her heart stopped. What? Jake leaned forward. Listen, I thought this was just fun, you know? I didn't sign up to play house again. Melissa's world tilted. You told me? I told you what you wanted to hear, Jake said bluntly. But I'm not in this for the long haul. Her throat tightened. You bastard. Jake shrugged. I'm just being honest, babe. You'll figure something out. Melissa felt something snap inside her. This wasn't happening. She had left Daniel for this man. Betrayed the man who had built her a life, all for a guy who never truly wanted her back. Jake stood up. Look, you can crash here for a few nights, but I'm not. Melissa slapped him. Art. The crack echoed in the room, and for a moment, Jake looked stunned. Then his face darkened. That was a mistake. Melissa stared at him down. No. You were the mistake. She stormed out of the apartment, heart pounding in her chest. Everything was crumbling. Jake was done with her. Daniel was cutting her off. And for the first time in her life, Melissa was truly, utterly alone. As she walked down the empty street, her thoughts raced. What was she going to do? And more importantly, what was Daniel going to do next? Daniel sat in his truck, engine idling outside his attorney's office. The documents had been signed, filed, and stamped. Melissa was officially cut off. But he wasn't done. No, this was just the beginning. His phone buzzed. A text from Matt, his private investigator. Matt, it's ready. Check your email. Daniel's fingers trembled slightly as he opened the message. Attachments, photos, bank statements, text messages. Everything. Melissa and Jake's affair, documented in painful, humiliating detail. Hotel receipts. Romantic getaways. A hidden account Melissa had opened in her name, funneling thousands of dollars behind his back. One file, labeled Voice Recording Sophia, caught his attention. He hesitated before playing it. Sophia's voice came through, casual, almost amused. Yeah, Mom said Daniel will never suspect a thing. Honestly, I think it's kind of funny. He works all day thinking she's at home when really she's with Jake. Daniel's stomach turned. His own stepdaughter had been laughing at him this entire time. His jaw clenched as he forwarded the file to his attorney. Then he hit another number on his phone. Jason. A familiar voice answered. Yeah? Time to leak it, Daniel said, his voice ice cold. He hung up. Melissa and Jake thought they could humiliate him, use him, throw him away like garbage. Now they were about to find out what it felt like to be exposed to the world. Melissa's phone buzzed violently on the restaurant table. She glanced at the screen. 30 unread messages. Her stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Sophia sat across from her, sipping iced coffee, oblivious. You okay? Melissa's fingers shook as she opened her notifications. Group chat, work colleagues? Melissa, is this true? Jesus, I can't believe you did this to Daniel. Wow. Just wow. Her breath hitched. She clicked a link someone had sent. A blog post. Businessman Daniel Carter betrayed by wife and stepdaughter, the truth exposed. Beneath the headline were photos. Of her, of Jake, of their texts, of hotel bills. A full timeline of the affair. Melissa felt her skin go cold. Sophia frowned. What's wrong? Melissa turned the screen toward her. Sophia's face drained of color. Oh my God, she whispered. Melissa's grip tightened around her phone. Daniel did this. And he had proof from inside their own home. Sophia swallowed hard. Mom, we're screwed. Melissa gritted her teeth. No. She wouldn't go down like this. But before she could come up with a plan, her phone rang. Her boss. Her pulse spiked. No. Not now. Not this. She answered. Hello? Melissa, her boss said, voice tight. We need to talk now. Her stomach plummeted. She had just lost everything. Melissa sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Fired. Daniel had destroyed her career overnight. Tears blurred her vision as she turned to Sophia, who was scrolling through Twitter. Hashtag Melissa Carter affair was trending. Sophia turned pale. Mom, this is bad. Melissa exhaled shakily. I know. Sophia's gaze darted to her mother. What are we gonna do? Melissa swallowed. There was only one person left who could help. Jake. She dialed his number. The call rang. And rang. Straight to voicemail. Her blood ran cold. Jake was gone. Her hands trembled as she dialed again. Voicemail. He was cutting her off. Mom? Sophia whispered. He's not answering, is he? Melissa closed her eyes, heart pounding in terror. Daniel had torn her life apart in a matter of hours. But if he thought she was going to take this lying down, he was wrong. Get in the car, she snapped at Sophia. Where are we going? Melissa's eyes burned with rage. To Daniel's? She was going to make him pay. Daniel poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the dim light of his living room. He should have felt satisfied. Melissa was exposed, humiliated, fired. Jake had bailed on her like the coward he was. Sophia, the once arrogant stepdaughter, was watching her perfect world collapse. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. A sharp knock at the front door broke his thoughts. Daniel exhaled slowly. He knew who it was. He took his time, savoring the moment before opening the door. Melissa stood there, eyes red-rimmed, her once flawless hair now disheveled. Sophia stood slightly behind her, arms crossed, looking smaller than he had ever seen her. Melissa's voice was strained. Daniel, we need to talk. Daniel leaned against the doorway, completely calm. Do we? Melissa's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by his indifference. You ruined me. Daniel smirked. Did I? Her jaw clenched. You leaked everything. My job, my reputation. Daniel, you went too far. He took a slow sip of his drink. Too far? You slept with your ex-husband for over a year. You lied to my face. You used me. And now you're upset because you got caught? Melissa's eyes burned with desperation. I made a mistake. Daniel chuckled. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is accidentally spending too much on a shopping spree. You didn't make a mistake, Melissa. You made a choice. Over and over again. And now you get to live with it. Her shoulders shook with barely contained rage. You can't just erase me from your life, she hissed. Daniel took another slow sip. Watch me. Melissa's fists clenched. I want the house. Daniel laughed. Actually, I laughed. That's cute. He leaned closer, his voice low. You're not getting a dime. Not this house. Not my money. Not a thing. Sophia finally spoke, her voice small. Daniel, please? He turned his gaze to her, and for the first time, there was no warmth left. You betrayed me too, Sophia? His voice was cold, emotionless. Did you really think siding with her was going to work out for you? Sophia's eyes welled up. I was just... Daniel cut her off. Just what? Laughing behind my back? Helping your mother cheat on me? Lying straight to my face? She swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably. I didn't think it would end like this. Daniel smiled, a slow, cruel smile. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. Your mom and Jake are free to be together. Hope it was worth it. Melissa's lip trembled. Daniel, don't do this. He stepped back, his voice cold. Goodbye, Melissa. And then he slammed the door in her face. Melissa and Sophia sat in their car, stunned into silence. For the first time, reality sank in. Melissa was homeless. No money. No job. No backup plan. Sophia exhaled shakily. What now? Melissa gritted her teeth. Daniel wasn't going to win. She reached for her phone, scrolling through her contacts. There was one person left who might help. Her sister Laura. She hit call. Melissa? Laura's voice came through wary. Melissa swallowed hard. Laura, I need a place to stay. Silence. Then. I saw what happened, Laura said flatly. I read everything. Melissa's throat tightened. Laura? No, her sister's voice hardened. You did this to yourself, Melissa. I'm not taking you in. I'm not cleaning up your mess. Melissa's hands shook. I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem. And then click. The line went dead. Melissa dropped the phone into her lap, numb. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, we're screwed. Melissa slammed her hands against the steering wheel. No, her voice was sharp, almost desperate. We're not giving up. Sophia frowned. And what are we supposed to do? Sleep in the car? Melissa's breath came fast. Daniel wants us to beg. He wants us to suffer. I won't give him that satisfaction. Sophia exhaled shakily. Then what? Melissa's jaw tightened. Then we find another way. Daniel sat in his office, staring out at the Dallas skyline. It had been 3 days. 3 days since he had thrown Melissa out. 3 days since Sophia had looked at him with something other than arrogance. 3 days since they lost everything. And he felt nothing. Not guilt. Not regret. Just peace. His phone buzzed. A message from Matt. Matt. Melissa and Sophia checked into a cheap motel on the south side. Looks like she tried calling some family, but no one's helping her. Daniel exhaled slowly. Melissa was finally feeling what it was like to be left with nothing. And yet, some part of him wondered, was it enough? His revenge had been swift, brutal. But there was one more thing he needed to do. Something that would ensure that Melissa and Sophia truly understood the cost of betrayal. Daniel smirked as he picked up his phone. He wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Sophia sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the stained carpet, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. The reality of what she and her mother had done was finally sinking in. They had lost everything. The house. The money. The stability. Melissa paced back and forth, her nails digging into her palms. He wants us to suffer, she muttered. That's what this is. Sophia let out a humorless laugh. Well, congratulations, Mom. It's working. Melissa's head snapped toward her. Don't start with me, Sophia. Sophia glared. Don't start with you? Mom, what the hell did you expect? You thought Daniel was just going to let this slide? Melissa scoffed. I thought he'd be hurt, but he's vindictive. He wants to ruin us. Sophia's nails dug into her skin. Maybe because we deserve it? Melissa froze. Excuse me? Sophia's heart pounded in her chest, but she was too angry to stop. You played him, Mom. For a whole year. You used him, you lied to him, and she swallowed hard. I helped you. And now we're homeless. Melissa's expression hardened. Are you blaming me? Sophia stood up abruptly. Yes, Mom. I am. Melissa's face contorted in shock. I did this for us, Sophia. I did this because you wanted Jake, Sophia snapped. That's it. That's the whole truth, isn't it? You didn't care what it would do to me. Or to Daniel. You just wanted Jake. Melissa gritted her teeth. Don't act innocent, Sophia. You were in on this too. Sophia's stomach twisted. She had been. She had laughed at Daniel behind his back, had covered for her mother's lies. And now, she was paying for it. She exhaled sharply. I can't do this anymore. Melissa narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? Sophia clenched her fists. I'm leaving. Melissa's breath hitched. What? Sophia grabbed her bag and turned toward the door. Melissa grabbed her wrist. You are not walking out on me? Sophia ripped her arm free. Like you walked out on Daniel? Like you walked out on the life he gave us? Melissa's eyes burned with anger. Where are you going to go? You have nothing, Sophia. Sophia swallowed. She didn't know. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't stay here. Without another word, she walked out of the motel room, leaving her mother behind. Melissa sat in silence, staring at the motel door. Sophia was gone. Her own daughter had abandoned her. Melissa had thought Daniel was the one who would be left broken. She never imagined it would be her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. Unknown, still think you won? Her blood ran cold. Daniel. She gritted her teeth and typed back. Melissa, you're a monster. 3 dots appeared. A reply. Daniel. No, Melissa. I'm just giving you what you deserve. Melissa's hands shook with rage. He had systematically destroyed her life. Her job? Gone. Her home? Gone. Her reputation? Gone. She had nothing left. And Jake? He wasn't answering her calls anymore. Daniel had been right all along. Jake never wanted her back. Melissa squeezed her eyes shut. Tears burned her cheeks. She had lost. And worst of all, Daniel didn't even care anymore. She wasn't his pain. She was his lesson. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The weight on his chest was finally gone. Melissa and Sophia had been so sure he would crumble. Instead, he had thrived. His business was booming. He had cut every tie to his past. And best of all, Melissa was finally feeling the consequences of her actions. His phone buzzed. Another update from Matt. Matt. Melissa tried calling Jake 6 times today. No answer. She's stuck in a motel alone. Daniel smirked. It was poetic, really. Melissa had betrayed a good man for a useless one. And now, she had neither. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt peace. Melissa stood outside Daniel's house, the cold wind whipping through her hair. She had lost everything. And she needed to see him. She knocked. Silence. She knocked again. After a long moment, the door opened. Daniel stood there, looking at her like she was a stranger. Melissa's throat tightened. Daniel, please? He exhaled slowly. What do you want, Melissa? Her voice broke. I made a mistake. Daniel tilted his head slightly, expression unreadable. Which one? The cheating? The lying? Or the part where you laughed at me? Melissa winced. I wasn't thinking. No, Daniel cut her off. You were thinking. You just weren't thinking about me. Melissa swallowed hard. I want to fix this. Daniel's eyes darkened. There is no this, Melissa. You ended this when you climbed into bed with Jake. Melissa choked back a sob. I have nothing. Daniel's lips curled slightly. And whose fault is that? Melissa stared at him, searching for a trace of the man she had once known. But he was gone. Daniel had won. And she would never get him back. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daniel's expression didn't change. And then, in the coldest voice she had ever heard, he said, Too late. And then he shut the door in her face. Melissa sank to her knees on the front porch, sobbing. For the first time she understood. This wasn't just karma. This was justice. Melissa sat in her car outside Daniel's house, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The finality in his voice haunted her. Too late. The man who once loved her, who would have done anything for her, had completely erased her from his life. But she couldn't accept it. With a deep breath, she got out of the car and stormed back to his front door. She pounded on it, rage and desperation flooding through her veins. After a few agonizing moments, the door swung open again. Daniel stood there, arms crossed, his expression blank. Unmoved. Melissa's chest tightened. We need to talk. Daniel sighed. We just did. She stepped forward, voice trembling. You don't get to just cut me out of your life like this. We had years together. You cheated, Daniel said flatly, his voice calm. You lied to my face. Over and over again. And now that your life has fallen apart, you suddenly care about me? Melissa's throat tightened. I was confused, she whispered. Daniel's lips curled into a smirk. No, you were selfish. Her breath caught. He leaned against the doorframe, his gaze piercing. Tell me, Melissa. If I hadn't found out, if I hadn't walked into that hotel room, would you still be here? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Because she knew the answer. And so did he. Daniel chuckled. It was cold. Amused. That's what I thought, he muttered. Melissa took a shaky breath. I know I messed up. But I was happy with you, Daniel. I just got caught up in bullshit. Daniel snapped, his patience snapping like a tight wire. You were happy with what I gave you. You weren't happy with me? Melissa flinched. He shook his head, stepping back. There's nothing left to say. Melissa's heart pounded. Daniel, please? But he was already closing the door. Panic flooded her. She grabbed the door, holding it open. Daniel stared at her. What are you doing? Her voice cracked. I don't have anyone left. Daniel exhaled slowly, then said, That's not my problem. And then, with one last shove, he closed the door in her face. For the first time, Melissa Carter was truly alone. Daniel sat on his couch, staring at his phone. Matt had sent him another update. Melissa had checked into a rundown motel on the south side of town. Alone. Jake. He had disappeared. Daniel smirked. Exactly as planned. He leaned back, letting the satisfaction sink in. Melissa had thought she could trade him in for a better option. Now, she had nothing. Her world had crumbled into the very dust she had tried to leave him in. His phone buzzed. A text. From Sophia. Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment before finally opening it. Sophia, Daniel. I messed up. Can we talk? A slow exhale escaped him. He should have ignored her. He should have deleted the message and moved on. But something in his gut told him to listen. Because Sophia was starting to break. And Daniel wanted to hear her beg. Sophia sat in a tiny coffee shop, her fingers tapping anxiously against her cup. She had sent the text 2 hours ago. No response. Her chest ached. She had never thought this would happen. Melissa had always been in control. She had always known how to talk her way out of anything. But this time? This time they had lost everything. And for the first time, Sophia saw her mother for what she truly was, a liar. A selfish, manipulative liar. Daniel had been right. She had chosen the wrong side. The door to the coffee shop opened and her breath hitched. Daniel. He walked in, his posture calm, controlled. His expression unreadable. Sophia swallowed hard as he approached the table and sat down across from her. For the first time she felt small. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. You have 1 minute to explain why I'm here. Sophia's heart pounded. This wasn't the man she had mocked before. This was a different Daniel. A man who had nothing to lose. She licked her lips, trying to find the words. I messed up, she whispered. I see that now. Daniel said nothing. Sophia's chest tightened. I shouldn't have taken Mom's side. I thought she was doing what was best. But I was wrong. Daniel leaned back. Why are you telling me this now? Sophia swallowed. Because I don't want to be like her. A long silence stretched between them. Then Daniel finally spoke. His voice was calm. Cold. I don't care. Sophia's stomach dropped. Daniel, please? He stood up. You helped destroy my life, Sophia. And now that your mother is sinking, you want to switch ships. Sophia's throat burned. I just want to make things right. Daniel smirked. Too late. Tears welled in her eyes. So that's it? Daniel exhaled sharply. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. But then he shook his head. You made your bed, he muttered. Now lie in it. And just like that he walked away, leaving Sophia in the ruins of her own betrayal. For the first time in years, Daniel Carter felt free. No more pretending. No more wondering what Melissa was doing behind his back. No more being a fool in his own home. His divorce was finalized. His finances were intact. And best of all, Melissa and Sophia were gone. They had been so sure he would crumble without them. Instead, he was thriving. He had moved into a new condo on the other side of Dallas, away from the memories of his past. His business had never been better, and for the first time in a long time he actually enjoyed coming home. No drama. No betrayal. Just peace. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Emily was a realtor he had met last week. Beautiful, smart, and most importantly, not Melissa. Emily, hey handsome. Still on for dinner tonight? Daniel smiled. A real, genuine smile. Melissa had thought she was his world. She had thought he would never move on. And yet here he was doing just that. He grabbed his keys and headed out. His past was dead and buried. And he had never felt better. Melissa sat in the dingy motel room, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Who was she anymore? She had been so sure she was making the right choice. Jake was supposed to be her future. Sophia was supposed to be on her side. Daniel was supposed to forgive her. And now, Jake was gone. Sophia had turned against her. Daniel had erased her from his life. Her phone rang. She grabbed it quickly, heart pounding. "Jake." She answered, her voice desperate. "Jake?" Silence. Then, a woman's voice. "Sorry, sweetheart," the woman purred. "Jake's busy." Melissa's breath caught in her throat. Who is this?" The woman laughed. "I'm his new girlfriend." "Who are you?" The line went dead. Melissa's hands shook. Jake had moved on. And now she was truly alone. She had lost everything. And worst of all, Daniel didn't even care. Word spread fast. Melissa's affair was no longer a secret. It had spread through her old job, through their social circles, through everyone who had once respected her. She had become a joke. Everywhere she went, she felt the stares. People whispered behind her back. "That's Melissa Carter. She cheated on her husband and lost everything. I heard her ex-husband dumped her too. She used to live in that huge house. Now she's in a motel." Melissa had always loved attention. Now, she hated it. She had thought she was trading up. Instead, she had thrown away the only good thing she ever had. And the worst part? She couldn't take it back. Sophia sat at the edge of her motel bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. Her life was unrecognizable. She had gone from a beautiful home, a secure future, and a stepfather who had always been there for her, to this. A cheap motel. No money. No stability. And worst of all, she had done this to herself. Her mother was unraveling, paranoid, bitter, and desperate. Melissa barely ate, barely spoke, except to blame Daniel for everything. But Sophia knew the truth now. Daniel hadn't ruined them. Her mother had. And she had helped. Her phone sat beside her, Daniel's contact open. Her finger hovered over the call button. She had betrayed him, mocked him, treated him like a joke. But now she needed his help. Could she even ask for it? She swallowed hard and took a deep breath. And then she pressed call. Daniel watched as Sophia's name appeared on his phone screen. He let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then he picked up. Silence on the other end. Then, finally, a small, hesitant voice. "Daniel?" He leaned back in his chair. "Sophia." She exhaled shakily. I don't know what to say." Daniel smirked. "Then why did you call?" Sophia hesitated. "Because I get it now. I see what Mom did. I see what I did." Daniel let the silence stretch. Let her feel the weight of her words. Then he finally spoke. "I don't care." Sophia's breath hitched. "Daniel? You think you can just say sorry and make this right?" His voice was calm, controlled. "Unforgiving." "I was wrong," she whispered. He chuckled. "Yeah, you were." Another pause. Then she choked out the words he had been waiting for. "I need help." Daniel's smirk widened. There it was. The moment she realized she had burned her last bridge. He exhaled sharply. "Not my problem." And then he hung up. Sophia stared at her phone in disbelief, her hands trembling. Daniel was really done with her. For the first time in her life, she was completely on her own. And she had no one to blame but herself. Melissa was a ghost of herself. She had lost her home, her job, her daughter, her reputation. And now, she was begging for scraps. She stood outside Daniel's office building, waiting. She hadn't seen him in weeks, but she had one last thing to say. Finally, the glass doors swung open. Daniel stepped out, looking better than ever. Confidence. Successful. At peace. Melissa's heart clenched. She stepped forward. "Daniel?" He stopped, turning to face her. His eyes were empty. She swallowed hard. I just wanted to say goodbye." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Goodbye?" Tears burned her eyes. "I lost everything." He tilted his head. "And?" Her lip trembled. "Do you even care?" Daniel let out a slow, humorless laugh. "No," he said. "I don't." And with that he walked away. Melissa watched him go, tears slipping down her face. This was it. This was karma. And she had earned every bit of it. The night was cold, and the streets were nearly empty as Melissa Carter walked alone, her coat pulled tightly around her thin frame. She had lost everything. Her home. Her security. Her family. And now she had no one left to turn to. Jake had been a fantasy, a stupid, reckless dream that had turned into a nightmare. He had dumped her the second her money ran out, moving on to a younger woman with no baggage. Sophia, her own daughter, had cut ties with her. And Daniel? Daniel had won. For months she had tried to survive on her own, hopping from one cheap motel to another, taking low-wage jobs just to afford her next meal. She had thought she could handle it. But now she was standing outside Daniel's new lake house, staring at the warm glow from inside. She had no right to be here. She knew that. But she had nowhere else to go. With a deep breath, she walked up the driveway and knocked on the door. Silence. Her heart pounded. She knocked again. The door swung open. And there he was. Daniel Carter. The man she had thrown away. The man who had rebuilt himself from the ashes she left behind. He looked different. Stronger. Confident. Happier. Melissa's breath hitched. Daniel, His expression hardened. What are you doing here? Her lip trembled. I need to talk to you. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. We don't have anything to talk about. Melissa stepped closer. Please? Daniel sighed, rubbing his jaw. You have 5 minutes? She swallowed hard. I made a mistake. He smirked. Cold. Amused. No kidding. Melissa's stomach twisted. I thought I wanted Jake, but I was wrong. He never cared about me. You were the only one who ever truly loved me. Daniel's gaze didn't soften. I miss you, she whispered. I miss us. A long silence stretched between them. Then Daniel let out a slow, humorless laugh. You miss me? He repeated. Melissa, you didn't miss me when you were in that hotel room with Jake. You didn't miss me when you were laughing with Sophia about how stupid I was. Her throat tightened. I was lost. Daniel's smirk faded. His voice was ice cold. No, Melissa. You weren't lost. You were selfish. Tears filled her eyes. I want to fix this. Daniel took a slow breath. Then, in the calmest, deadliest voice she had ever heard, he said, You can't fix what you destroyed. Her hands shook. Daniel, please? He tilted his head. Tell me something. If Jake hadn't left you, if Sophia hadn't abandoned you, would you still be here? Melissa's chest tightened. She opened her mouth. No words came out. Because the truth was brutal. If Jake had stayed, if her life hadn't fallen apart, she wouldn't be standing here right now. And Daniel knew it. His smirk returned. Cold. Final. That's what I thought. Melissa's legs shook. I have nothing. Daniel exhaled slowly. That's not my problem. And then he shut the door in her face. Melissa stood there, trembling, tears slipping down her face. She had always believed Daniel would always be there, no matter what. But now she knew the truth. She had lost him forever. Melissa sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her nails bit into her skin. Daniel had looked at her like she was nothing. And for the first time in her life she felt like nothing. For months she had been telling herself she could turn this around. That if she just apologized, if she just found the right words, Daniel would take her back. That deep down he still loved her. But tonight she saw it in his eyes. That love was gone. She had broken him. And now, he had erased her. Her phone buzzed. A notification from a news article. She frowned and clicked on it. Business tycoon Daniel Carter expands multi-million-dollar firm. A recent photo of him flashed across the screen, standing at a podium, shaking hands with investors. Successful. Thriving. Unbothered. Melissa's stomach churned. This was his revenge. Not the leaked affair. Not the financial ruin. Watching him move on, become greater than ever, without her. Melissa closed her eyes. For the first time she truly understood. This wasn't just karma. This was justice. Daniel sat on the deck of his lake house, watching the stars shimmer over the water. His world was finally quiet. No lies. No betrayal. No toxic people pulling him down. Just peace. Melissa had come crawling back. He had seen the desperation in her eyes, the realization that she had destroyed the only real thing she ever had. And yet, he had felt nothing. No anger. No resentment. Just freedom. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Emily, see you tomorrow? Daniel smiled. A real smile. He typed back a quick response. Daniel, can't wait. Melissa had been his greatest mistake. But she had also been his greatest lesson. He had loved her. And now, he had outgrown her. The past was exactly that, the past. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Carter was truly happy. Sophia sat at a small diner on the outskirts of Dallas, stirring her coffee absently. It had been a year since her world had fallen apart. A year since Daniel had shut her out. A year since her mother had burned every bridge. A year since she had finally seen the truth. She had spent months working dead-end jobs, struggling to make ends meet. Her mother? She had never recovered. Melissa had spiraled into a pit of self-pity and resentment, blaming Daniel for everything instead of accepting responsibility. But Sophia had learned her lesson. She had been cruel, selfish, and blind. She had taken Daniel's kindness for granted, helped her mother betray him, and when it all came crashing down, she had assumed she could just waltz back into his life. But Daniel had no use for traitors. And she didn't blame him. Sophia pulled out her phone, staring at his name in her contacts. She had already apologized once. And he had acknowledged it, but nothing more. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't vengeful. He was just done. And yet, she still felt the need to make things right. She started typing. Sophia, I know we'll never go back to what we were. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I've changed. And I'm sorry for everything. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed send. This time she wasn't expecting a response. She just wanted to finally let go of the guilt. And maybe that was enough. Daniel sat in his office, staring at the message from Sophia. A year ago he would have laughed at it. Or ignored it. But now, he didn't feel anger anymore. He didn't feel betrayed. He just felt indifferent. For months, Sophia had been just another person from his past. But now, he was curious, maybe not about her, but about who she had become. With a sigh, he picked up his phone and replied, Daniel, meet me tomorrow. Same coffee shop as before. 2 p.m. The next day, Sophia arrived early. Her heart hammered in her chest as she saw Daniel walk in. He looked good. Better than she had ever seen him. His shoulders were relaxed, his expression calm, like someone who had found peace. The exact opposite of her mother. Daniel sat across from her, leaning back slightly. You wanted to talk. Sophia exhaled. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Again. Daniel studied her. You already did. I know. She swallowed hard. But I don't want you to think I'm like her. I'm not. I learned from what happened. I know I can't take back what I did. I don't want you to hate me. Daniel let out a slow breath. I don't hate you, Sophia. Her chest tightened. You don't? He shook his head. No. Hate takes energy. And I stopped wasting energy on the past a long time ago. Her stomach twisted. So, what now? Daniel smiled, a small, knowing smile. Now, we move on. Sophia nodded slowly. She had expected bitterness, anger, a final rejection. Instead, she got something else. Closure. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Melissa sat alone in her tiny apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling. Sophia had moved on. Daniel had thrived. And she was stuck. Daniel had been her greatest safety net, the man she had always assumed would take her back. But now she knew the truth. He had erased her from his life. No second chances. No redemption arc. Just the cold, hard reality of consequences. And now she would live with it, for the rest of her life. The world outside was quiet as Daniel Carter leaned against the balcony railing of his lake house, staring at the dark water below. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and fresh air, something he had learned to appreciate since cutting ties with his old life. It had been 2 years. 2 years since Melissa betrayed him. 2 years since Sophia laughed at him. 2 years since he watched them fall apart, piece by piece. Now everything was different. Melissa was gone from his life. He hadn't seen or heard from her since that night she begged for forgiveness. And honestly, he never thought about her anymore. Sophia? She had managed to rebuild her life. They weren't close, not like they used to be, but she had finally taken accountability for her actions. And that was enough. Daniel had found something better than revenge. He had found peace. His phone buzzed on the patio table. A message from Emily. Emily, hey, dinner was amazing tonight. Hope you sleep well. See you soon? Daniel smiled. He had spent so long caught in the past, drowning in anger. But the truth was, Melissa wasn't his greatest loss. She was just his greatest mistake. And now he had finally closed that chapter for good. He picked up his phone and typed back a quick reply. Daniel, see you soon. With that, he set the phone down and took one last deep breath. For the first time in years, there was no weight on his chest. No regrets. No bitterness. Just the quiet satisfaction of moving on. And he had never felt better. The ultimate revenge wasn't ruining Melissa. It wasn't exposing her affair. It wasn't leaving her homeless. It wasn't cutting off Sophia. It was walking away and never looking back. Because the truth was, Melissa had already destroyed herself. She had made her choices. She had betrayed him. And in the end, she had been forced to live with the weight of her own consequences. That was justice. That was karma. Daniel had won, not by destroying her but by rebuilding himself. He had thrived. He had found peace. He had found a life without her. Because the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's happiness. And Daniel Carter? He had never been happier. A question for the audience. What do you think was Melissa's biggest mistake? Was it choosing Jake over Daniel? Was it believing Daniel would always take her back? Or was it never truly loving him in the first place? Let me know in the comments. A lesson to remember. This story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about consequences. It was about what happens when you take someone's love for granted. So if you've ever been in Daniel's shoes, if you've ever been betrayed, used, or lied to, remember this. The best revenge isn't hurting them back. It's walking away. It's thriving. It's becoming so much better without them that they regret ever losing you. And that is the ultimate victory. Thank you for joining. The end.